So this is the 411, so called because we're answering 4 questions about discipleship on one sheet of paper in 1 hour. So take your sheet of paper, and ours is going to go a little bit faster than an hour, a lot faster, and that's because we're modeling today for you how to do this with your disciple in a condensed way. Take some time when you do it with them. Take your sheet of paper and make a booklet. So we're making the booklet because we then have space for these 4 questions, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll turn to the front page as we answer that first question. The top of your page, write the question that we're answering with your disciple. Have them follow along. And here, you're answering this question of what? What is it that Jesus calls us to do as we begin to follow him? Now, identity tells us who we are, but what does he call us to do as we get into the mission with him? The answer, or where we'll find what Jesus, how he answers this question, is found in Matthew 28, verses 18 through 20. So write that there, and we're going to fill out this page and answer that question. Now, have your disciple grab their Bible and read along with you. We want them to participate in this process. So here in verses 18 to 20 in Matthew 28, it says this. Have them read this. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them into the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I'm with you always to the end of the age." All right, so that's not just information. We're going to really break it down now with our disciple and identify 7 specific things that Jesus calls his disciples into in this answering of the question of what. The first thing that he calls us to do is to deal with this idea that Jesus has all authority. So write the word authority underneath the drawing of a crown. And then the way that we're going to respond to this on each of these is answer this question of yes or no. So they can write over here on the right, yes/no. And you can ask them, okay, so are you at a place where you are ready to let Jesus have authority in your life? A simple way to help them understand this is really the word that we find in authority is the word author. Are you ready for Jesus to be the author of your story? If you're there, then circle yes. If not, that's okay, circle no, and that becomes, for you as the disciple maker, a starting place to help them process through what does it mean to begin following Jesus. If authority is a challenge for them, there's another tool that you can begin to engage with, but that's for another video. So if they say yes, we're moving on to the next one. So all authority has been given to me. Therefore, Jesus says to go. Now, question here that we're asking our disciple is, are you ready to be led by Jesus? Are you ready to go wherever he calls you to go? If yes, circle yes. Now ask them again, what's the next thing that Jesus calls us to do here as you're reading through it? It says, go and make disciples. So we're going to draw a symbol for making disciples. And right underneath that, make disciples. And over to the right of that, again, yes or no. Are you ready? You can ask them to sign up to learn what it means to make disciples. Yes or no. And you can even point out the fact that we're doing this. This is making disciples, just this very sheet. So if they're wondering what that looks like, this is what that looks like. And then it says of all nations. So now you're going to draw a globe. And there's different ways to draw this. I kind of prefer this way, but you can draw the whole earth with the different continents, however you want to do it. But draw the globe. And then there's a hashtag here. The guys who have condensed this material are from the No Place Left network. So write No Place Left. So we're saying that we're going to go and make disciples until there's no place left in the whole earth that has not heard and had a chance to be a disciple of Jesus. Are you ready to go until that task is completed? Yes or no? And again, if no, this is a great place to start with helping them understand what this looks like. And so then he says, baptizing them into the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. So here we're going to draw a symbol for baptism. And yes or no. So the question here is, have you been baptized? And if they're a new believer, probably the answer is no. And so you're going to ask them, when would you like to be baptized? And if they have, then the question also is, are you ready to baptize others as you begin to make new disciples? Yes or no? And then finally, we find Jesus saying this, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded you. This is his last command here. And you can write the word obey underneath this. And obviously, we find out how to obey Jesus as we're reading his word. So if you're ready to obey Jesus and teach others to do so, say yes. And then Jesus makes a promise. So after saying some commands, he makes a promise to us. So draw a heart and write with us. So we have this promise that Jesus says, I will be with you always. So if you believe that, write yes / no and circle yes. So now we've looked at 7 different elements of this Great Commission, answering this question of what does it look like to begin to join Jesus in his mission? That's the first question. All right, so on the second page of the 411, we're going to answer the question, who? Jesus has identified that he has called us into his mission to make disciples. Now, who do we begin to disciple? In the center of the page, write your name. Have the disciple write their name. And then draw a circle around it. Now we're going to help them connect this idea of discipleship with the relationships that are already in their life that are ripe for following Jesus. So have them draw 10 lines out from this circle as they begin to identify their oikos, this Greek word for network of relationships. So have them write at the end of each of these lines a person in their life who is not yet following Jesus. I'm going to fill mine out, take some time with your disciple, and then we'll come back. So, if your disciple says that there's no one in their life who could possibly go down on this page, have them flip out their phone and scroll through their address book. They're going to find people who are not yet following Jesus. Or open their Facebook, open their social media, and look through. They're going to find people that are in their life already who are not yet moving towards God. Have them write those names here, and this becomes a starting point for them in who to begin to disciple. So, this is who. Now, at the top of the page, underneath who, have them write John 17, verses 20 through 21. We're going to look at this passage to get some understanding of this call by Jesus for us to make disciples of those already in our life. So here again, have your disciple read, and we are in verses 20 to 21, right down here. And Jesus says this, "My prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me." Now, ask your disciple, who is Jesus praying for here? And as they think about it, they're going to realize that Jesus is not only praying for those that are right in front of them, but those who will hear through their message, and ultimately that the world will hear. You can have them take some time and identify with each of these relationships who's going to be impacted by this. So one of the people on my list is Muhammad. If he begins to walk with Jesus, the Burmese population is going to encounter God. So, as I pray for him, the Burmese population in our city is going to be touched through him as he begins to follow Jesus. Shakuna is Ethiopian here in our city. And so the Ethiopian population, or the refugees, he's in the refugee population, will be touched. So you can have your disciple identify with each one of these places where they are going to impact as they begin to follow Jesus. Okay, so we begin to see that the power of making disciples actually ripples through relationships. So that we can really drive this home, have your disciple at the bottom of the page draw 4 circles next to each other, with an arrow in between. So we're really going to drive home the fact that this discipleship flows through relationship. All right, so we'll start with reading 2 Timothy 2, verse 2. Paul says here, "And the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable men who will also be qualified to teach others." Who is writing here? It's Paul, right? So we can write a P in our first circle. And who is he writing to? The letter is to Timothy. Ask your disciple, who then will be impacted by Timothy? Well, he says that which you've heard in the presence of many, entrust to reliable people. So here we can write reliable people, or men, RP for reliable people, so that they can teach others. So we find here that this discipleship begins to flow through relationships as Paul pours into Timothy, and Timothy is challenged to give it to reliable people, and reliable people passing it along to others. So we've just answered this question, who, and really cast a vision for the power of discipleship flowing through relationships, one of the primary ways that Jesus modeled the kingdom growing. All right, so as we continue on, we're going to answer this question of how. How do we begin in this process of making disciples? And for those who are new believers and making disciples of those who don't yet follow Jesus, the people that they are talking to need to hear the gospel. So we're going to equip them with how they can begin to share the gospel. This is a real simple way to do that. Have them write on their paper a cross in the middle with a crown on top of it. And then to either side of that cross, we're drawing an arrow back and an arrow forward. This is a very simple tool for helping them get equipped to share their story. So all the way on the left, you can write this phrase, time in my life. There was a time in my life. And then underneath each of the arrows, write 1, 2, and then all the way out on the right, have them put a question mark. So what we're doing here is we're assembling a short 15-second story that can be communicated in conversation. Really helpful tool. So oftentimes we don't have time to sit down with somebody and share a 5 or 10 minute long testimony of our story, but we could inject into the conversation a short 15-second story. So what we're doing is we're building this by saying there was a time in my life where we're identifying 2 characteristics before we began to receive the forgiveness of Jesus and follow him as king. And then we're identifying 2 things that happened as a result of us beginning to follow him. And oftentimes the flip of these things that were the reality before we begin to follow him. And then we're challenging somebody, do you have a story like that? So what that looks like practically is to say, there's a time in my life where I was depressed and alone, and then I received the forgiveness of Jesus and began to follow him as my king. And now I can honestly say I feel surrounded and I feel free. Do you have a story like that? So you see the power punch that happens through this short 15 seconds as we start with this question, or start with this statement, there was a time in my life, identifying 2 characteristics, and they can be 2 different things that God will bring up in your heart as you share this. Many times it changes as I'm sharing it. I might say I used to be religious and prideful, and then I began to receive the forgiveness of Jesus and follow him as my king, and then I began to understand true humility and nearness to him. Do you have a story like that? So have your disciple fill this out and then begin to practice with them a couple of times, them sharing it with one another. You can also utilize this bottom space to put another tool that we have on our channel called the 3 circles right here. I oftentimes will just stick with this 15-second story, but if you feel led, give your disciple another tool, the 3 circles right here in this space. So this is the 3rd step, which is answering this question of how do I begin to make that disciple. So on the last page, as we begin to wrap up our 411, we're going to answer that question of when. It's important to immediately make plans to meet with this new disciple who's just beginning to take steps. This seed can be stolen by the enemy or attacked. And we want to begin to meet up with them as soon as we can to continue to cultivate that process that Jesus has them in. So when? And here are 4 things that we're going to identify in that process. That first thing being pray. So we equipped our disciple to pray for 10 people for 10 minutes a day. in our 10 for 10 map. Now, when and where are they going to do that? So have them right here, a place and a time that they can do that. You can even offer suggestions. I often offer the suggestion of doing this in the shower. I have it in a gallon Ziploc baggie that's hanging from the back of my shower head. So you could say, I'm going to do it in the morning and as I shower. So when and where, that's answering the question of when am I going to pray. The second thing that we're going to look at with our disciples is who are you going to share with? Have them flip back to that 10 for 10 prayer list and circle a name on the list and then write that name right here. So this is somebody that they're going to be committing to sharing with between now and the next time that you get together. So who are they going to share with? And they can use that 15-second story or 3 circles to begin to talk with this potential new disciple. Now the next question is, when can we meet? We want to meet again soon. So maybe it's in the same place that you are right now, and maybe it's at that same time a week later. I think we have this idea that everything has to take a week before we meet again in our culture. If possible, meet with your disciples sooner. Meet with them in the next 48 hours. But when and where are you going to meet? Again, so have them write that information right here. And then finally, because this discipleship flows through, this kingdom flows through relationship, who can they invite to join next time? And maybe this is somebody off of their 10 for 10, maybe it's the person they've shared with, but have them think through, who can I invite to join us next time we get together? All right, so this has been the 411. I hope that's a helpful tool in getting you started in making disciples. Guys, I sure hope this has been helpful content, and if it has, please take a moment and subscribe to our channel and leave us a question, leave us a comment. We'd love to connect with you and talk with you more.